This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Lot to cover for today because we have MLB, decent slate going on for tonight, but also some futures talk across the NFL now that we know what the Cleveland Browns outlook for 2022 looks like. I'll go through my win total projections for them and outline a bet I like in the AFC North based on the news from last week. And we'll recap last week, go through some golf and NASCAR bets we talked about in the show and let you know how things went there. So a lot of ground to cover. Let's dive on in and break it on down. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Welcoming you to today's show. Again, we'll be talking about some MLB later on today, some strikeout props, my numbers like. We'll go through 2022 futures bets in the AFC North and much more. First of all, big thank you to Tom Vecchio for filling in for me back on Friday. Tom will be back with you Thursday and Friday of this week to talk about some more baseball and some more NFL stuff. I will be out in Ireland for the Northwestern versus Nebraska game, not to cover, just for funsies. Got to watch the Cats, international Cats coming up this week. So we'll be flying to Ireland on Wednesday for that out in Dublin. Going to be a blast. Pretty pumped for that. So Tom will be back with you Thursday and Friday. Check out Tom on Twitter at DFS_Tom. We'll still have shows every day throughout this week. Going to have our typical show tomorrow with Pitching Ninja and Brandon Gadula. And then also on Wednesday, Ed Fang will drop by to talk about week 0 in college football. It is already here. We'll get some Nebraska Northwestern questions in there as well. We'll dive on into the MLB slate for today in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We, of course, are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts, we are there. Hit subscribe. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Again, we are now in daily shows for hopefully ever, especially with NFL season just around the corner. So hit subscribe to get all that in your podcast feed wherever you listen to your podcasts. NFL kickoff is still a few weeks away, but you can get in on the action now on FanDuel Sportsbook with their NFL Super Win bonus. Right now, anyone who places at least a $50 Super Bowl winner bet will get $5 back for each win their team has during the regular season. There are also a ton of other futures markets available like team win totals, division winners, player props, and so much more. There's no better place to get ready for football season than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states only. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable free bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Max free bet $50. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Louisiana, 1-877-770-STOP. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Tennessee, call the Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Or in Wyoming, 1-800-522-4700. Couldn't find any money lines. My numbers liked for today, at least based on the Monday morning numbers, did lock in the Rays minus 190 last night, but that is no longer available. So let's talk about some strikeout props. My favorite one for today is going to be Domingo Germán under 4.5 strikeouts. And right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, that's at minus 102. You can get a better number elsewhere. I will say that. Yeah, plus 120. I'm staring at it right now. So shop around, find the best number on Germán because you can get better than minus 102 currently at FanDuel Sportsbook. I have Germán at 3.94 strikeouts, and it's a combination of a couple things putting me towards the under here. The first one is that Germán hasn't been super effective. He has a 19% strikeout rate across his 6 starts in the majors this year. And he's also facing a team with an active roster strikeout rate of 20%. He's also not getting a ton of leash from a pitch count perspective. He's hit 90 pitches once, but has never exceeded that. And he's gone 86 or fewer pitchers in all of his other starts. Now, the caveat here is I had an under on Germán last week. Did not go well. He finished with 6 strikeouts on 71, I believe, pitches. So that didn't go well. But I am going to go back to it here once again. I just think that it's the right move when you add together everything here with the pitch counts, potentially some rain in the mix in New York as well. Matchup's pretty tough, not super effective. The Mets could just chase him early because they're a pretty good offense. I think you add all that together, and it says to me the under is the play here for Herman. Now, in terms of when you're betting this, your guardrails for knowing what to bet it at, I've actually got Herman's strikeout or his under odds at 63%. That might be a bit high. So what I would say is take 63, lower it a little bit. Once we get to minus 150, that's about 60% implied odds. That's where you probably back off. I would say probably before that too, to give yourself more value, more wiggle room. But I doubt we get there, honestly, just based on where the market currently is. Again, you can get plus 120, under 5.5 or 4.5 right now. For FanDuel, it's at minus 102. Even at minus 102, I think that's totally fine. I would say to give myself wiggle room to be wrong, I would be okay going to minus 130 on the under here. I would also say if you're restricted to just FanDuel, it's probably going to shift from minus 102 because the other numbers are above this one. So I'd expect that to probably lengthen back out to plus, even money, somewhere around there. So if you're going to bet FanDuel, wait a bit potentially, see if the other markets move. But overall, I would say you want the under on Herman at 4.5 strikeouts. Again, my numbers have under odds at 63%. Use that as your guiding light to decide whether the numbers available to you are advantageous or ones you would like to pass up on. I'm also showing a bit of value on Jake Odorizzi, though not a ton right now. He's at plus 114 in the FanDuel alternate strikeout prop market to go over 4.5 strikeouts. So to get 5+ strikeouts. And I haven't projected at 4.35, which puts Odorizzi's over odds around 49%. His implied odds are 46.7%. So it's a pretty small edge. This one really does depend on the number you can find. There were some 3.5s floating around on Odorizzi this morning, and they're still available. Again, minus 135. He's at DraftKings right now over 3.5. I actually am okay with that one. I have him 60% to go over 3.5, so around minus 150 be fair market there. If you can find him at even longer odds to get 5+ strikeouts, I could buy in there. So a bit more aggressive. Does have pretty big home road splits, and he's on the road here, so account for that. But some of the road starts he's had have been against lower strikeout teams. I've not bet this one yet. I like a bigger edge before I buy into this. Again, I'm at 49% or 49%. He's at 47% implied in the FanDuel market, but over 3.5, minus 150 or so, I think is a fair number. You can get minus 135 as of right now. So I check around at Odorizzi, see if you are comfortable with what he's doing, see if you like the matchup for him against the Pirates, stuff like that. Weather is in play a bit here, which is scary for an over, so check that out as well. But I would say shop around at Odorizzi, see what you can get, and if you can get an advantageous number, I could be okay there. With the FanDuel market, with the other markets, I have not bet yet, but am close to doing so. So check around at Odorizzi, but Herman, to me, is the prime strikeout prop target for today. Let's go now and talk about some NFL futures. We now know the length of the Deshaun Watson suspension. He will be suspended 11 games after 24 credible accusations of sexual misconduct and in some cases, sexual assaults. We have some clarity here on the length of the suspension. And after I put Jacoby Brissett in as a starter for those first 11 games of the Browns, I had the Browns win total of 8.7 wins. Their win total at FanDuel right now is 8.5 with plus 135 on the over. And that's good enough where I think you could consider the over for this team. Looking into the schedule here for the Browns, I actually do have them favored, at least slight favorites in each of their first 4 games. They get the Panthers and Falcons on the road. They get the Jets and the Steelers at home. That's not a bad stretch for them. And things get awful from there on out. So their next 7 games before Watson returns are all really, really tough. I think I had them as underdogs in literally all those games after the first 4. So they're going to have a bad stretch. We know that for sure. Yeah, they're underdogs in all those games for me after the first 4 games. So pretty good the first 4 games. Next 7 really, really rough. And then they get Watson back in week number 13. And they have at least 60% win odds in 5 of their 6 games with Watson back, which is how you get to 8.7 wins. I am personally not going to bet this one. I don't want to have any reason to root for this team, honestly. I don't want to be happy if they win. I don't want that personally. Just don't feel good about that. So I'm not going to bet it. They have great talent on this roster. That's why the projection is high. The non-quarterback talent in the Browns is very good, and that's why my numbers are so high. If you put Watson on there in full, they'd be the fourth best team in the league by my numbers. So that's why I'm pretty high on them from a numbers perspective at 8.7 wins for this year. In terms of the AFC North, the Browns are behind the Bengals and Ravens. I've got the Bengals at 10 wins and the Ravens at 9.1. That's probably pretty low for the Ravens at 9.1 wins, but they're crazy difficult to project. Not a lot of pass catching talent, despite Isaiah Likely just beasting out in the preseason last night. Preseason DFS god Isaiah Likely. Passing efficiency is a big part of my model, and it's tough to make them be super efficient in that arena when, you know, the stuff behind Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman is dicey, to say the least. And even, you know, Bateman, I like him. I think he's going to be good, but still a bit untested. So it's hard for me to get super high in them from a modeling perspective. But the Bengals have the best win total by my projections by 0.9 wins. Decent amount of wiggle room there to be wrong. They are plus 170 to win the AFC North, which is 37% implied odds. I'm kind of willing to bite on that. I think that's actually a pretty good number. And I think that's my biggest takeaway here is that the Bengals are currently a value to win the AFC North right now. I've got them at, again, 10 wins, Ravens 9.1, Browns 8.7. And let me check on the Steelers really quick. I think they're on 7.1 wins for the Steelers for right now. Tough to bet against Mike Tomlin, but with the infrastructure on the quarterback, it's or in the quarterbacking situation, tough to get higher than that. So it's very possible I am too low on several teams in the AFC North, being the Ravens and the Steelers, but I agree with what my numbers say about the Bengals. I think they deserve to be as high as they are right now. So I will go with the Bengals at plus 170 to win the AFC North. I think they're a value to win there. I would take them there. Very okay with that one. I think that's the key takeaway here. Again, my numbers are showing some value on the Browns over 8.5 at plus 135, but not for me personally with the way I want to play things in terms of rooting interests for this year. That's going to recap wrap up the forward-looking stuff for this week. But as I mentioned last week, I do want to keep the covering the past element of the show in play here, largely for accountability. So you know that we're not giving out dumb recommendations here. That way you have better information to decide, do I actually care what this guy says, or should I look elsewhere for my bets? So I do want to go back through some bets from last week, specifically the longer term ones. It's hard to recap all the baseball stuff, though last week was a pretty good week for the most part in regards to that. Last week we had Brandon Gadula on, as always, to preview the BMW Championship. We'll have him on tomorrow as well, talk about the Tour Championship. He had Xander Schauffele at 20-1 to win. He finished third. He was in contention all week. He was right up there. Rory McIlroy 5 shots back and finished 8th. He was 10-1. And then the matchups Brandon discussed, he went 1-1-1 in those. He hit on Adam Scott over Sahith Theegala. That was minus 118. The draw was Max Homa and Tyrrell Hatton. There was no tie option there, so that one does push. Always be aware of that when you're betting to make sure. Typically, for the most part, you're going to want the option that gives you the push. You'll get better odds if a push is involved or a draw is involved in the market, but more often than not, that's going to be a higher hold market because they can kind of sneak higher hold in there on you without you really knowing about it. So for the most part, you do want to go with the markets that do include a push if there is a draw. And that was the case for Brandon last week. So that one did push. The loss was Brian Harmon topping Mito Pereira. Mito kind of struggled again. He's had a rough little stretch here for a bit. So Harmon topped Mito there. Only 30 golfers in the field for this week for the Tour Championship. Really fun format. We will need Brandon's expertise to figure out how to handle that one. He'll be on with us tomorrow to preview the Tour Championship and discuss all the intricacies for you there. For NASCAR, I had a shot with Michael McDowell at 30-1. I talked about 30-1. He was available at 40-1 before the week, but then he went out and qualified third. So McDowell closed at 20-1 to win the race on Sunday, and he was in contention all day. He led 14 laps. He was out front for a long stretch of this race, but once Chase Elliott got past him, McDowell slid back, restarted third with just a couple of laps left, and did not get a good restart. Got pushed back, got shuffled back, wound up finishing 6th. So didn't cash on McDowell, but good closing line value going from his shortest odds, which are 30-1, closing at 20-1. And having a guy at that long in contention all day, I felt pretty good about that. So did not cash, but I think the process was there and the results, not too bad, despite the bet not cashing. The other bet I had mentioned as potentially liking on the show was Joey Hand, top 10 at 18-1. That closed at 15-1. So again, some good CLV there. And Hand was actually running in the top 6 thanks to some strategy. He ran super long on his pit strategy and actually stretched out his fuel. Now, the downside of that was he was running 6, but had to take more fuel once he came in. Led to a longer pit stop. So he came out running around 19th. He had worked his way back up to 15th, was trying to pass Martin Truex Jr. for 14th, and he wiped out. So he wrecked. But, again, in contention, viable bet at 15-1. I think that are at 18-1, good closing line value. So although the NASCAR stuff didn't break in my favor from a results perspective, I still felt really good about the bets. Not just McDowell. I also had a Chris Buescher one added post-practice or post-qualifying, the NASCAR helper up on numberFire.com. That's where you'll see all my stuff that I add post-qualifying is up on numberFire.com. Don't have time to do a full podcast there, but felt good about Buescher, felt good about McDowell. Didn't break my favor in terms of results, but still I thought overall a solid weekend across the board. So I'm excited for Daytona for this week. I'll try to find some time to squeeze in Daytona talk. Maybe tomorrow. I'll try to run my Sims tonight to get you some Daytona discussion in there. And we can also maybe talk some F1. So I'll try to run those numbers tonight to get that on the show tomorrow, since I will be out on Thursday and Friday. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread, kind of covering the gambit for today across MLB and NFL, looking forward and then looking back at PGA and NASCAR as well. As mentioned, tomorrow we have Pitching Ninja on. He's going to preview the Tuesday slate for MLB, talk about his favorite strikeout props. He did hit Edward Cabrera last week, over 4.5 at -106. We'll see if he can go back-to-back with good recommendations there. Brandon Gadula will swing by, break down his thoughts on the Tour Championship as well. And like I said, try to squeeze in some NASCAR as well. If you want to get that in all of our podcasts right as they go up, make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your MLB bets for tonight, whatever it may be. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to talk some MLB and some PGA. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.